used to believe death behaved itself. People think morticians grow numb to it, that our skin thickens, that we don't dream of the dead we prepare. But I always took comfort in the order of it all. The quiet rooms, the clean silver tools, the way time seemed to slow to a respectful hush around a body. There was dignity in it, control, peace. At least there had been. Until Thanksgiving night, 1992, in the old Rayburn Funeral Home on the outskirts of Lycoming County. Back then, I was 33, still young enough to be pulling marathon shifts, but old enough to have seen more corpses than candles on my last birthday cake. The Rayburn place was a squat, brown-bricked box of a building sitting between a patch of woods and a field that turned to frozen mud by November. The wind liked to circle it, whistling under the roof tiles, rattling the gutters, making the whole building feel like a hollow thing being breathed into by something unseen. Most nights, I ignored the odd noises, but that Thanksgiving, I was alone. Rayburn was out of town for the holiday, and I had volunteered to finish the prep work for the services scheduled the next day. I told myself it was because I had no one waiting at home. No turkey, no family, no parade on TV. Just me, the bodies, and the hum of machines. I didn't mind. Or at least, I thought I didn't. It was just past 10 when I finished the arterial embalming on old Samuel Rittenhouse, a farmer who'd suffered a stroke out by his barn. His son had found him frozen, slumped against a fence post, like he'd simply decided to sit and rest and never gotten up again. His skin still had that winter-starched brittleness to it as I worked, like parchment left in the cold too long. Outside, sleet rattled the window. The generator buzzed, though the power hadn't flickered once. I washed my gloved hands, stripped off the apron, and reached for the paperwork on the metal desk in the corner of the embalming room. That was when the lights dimmed. Not much, just a pulse, as though the building exhaled. I paused, looked up, waited for the familiar hum of the old fluorescent tubes to steady. The generator coughed with a low, grinding rattle, and then whispering. At first I thought it was part of the generator's usual complaints, but no piece of machinery ever formed words, especially not ones that close, ones that soft. Cold. I turned so quickly I knocked over a tray of clamps. They clattered across the linoleum, and for a long moment, the room was silent except for their scattered ring. Then the whisper came again, drifting like fog. So cold, I couldn't move. My lungs refused to pull in enough air. A cold prickle climbed the back of my neck. "Hello?" I called out, hating how small my voice sounded in the tiled chamber. The cold deepened. I swear I felt something pass behind me, a thin ribbon of air colder than the refrigerated storage drawers lining the wall. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty prep room, the long steel tables, the pale shape of Samuel Rittenhouse under a sheet. Still, I wasn't alone. I felt it, heavy as a hand on my shoulder. I forced myself to walk the length of the room, checking the door to the hallway, then the adjacent office. All empty. The building was silent except for a sleet pattering at the windows, but the cold stayed. I returned to the prep room, and the instant I stepped back inside, every muscle in my body tightened. Something had changed. The metal drawers were trembling, lightly at first, then harder, rattling like something inside them struggled to get out. I froze, staring at them. The old models didn't lock easily, and Rayburn always complained about the track alignment. But these weren't subtle shifts. Each drawer shivered violently, as if fists pounded from the inside. My mouth went dry. "Don't," I whispered, as if I could command metal. The top right drawer slid open with a long, scraping shriek. My heart felt like it turned sideways in my chest. Inside lay Mrs. Emmeline Harrow, 87, frail, quiet. I'd finished her cosmetic work that afternoon. Now her head turned toward me, just her head, rolling stiffly, the neck cracking audibly. Her eyes opened, clouded, white, focused. Her stitched mouth worked, the thread popping, skin tearing as she forced it to move. Cold. My knees almost dropped out from under me. Emmeline, I croaked, instantly hating myself for using her name, as though the thing looking at me was still her at all. Before I could take a step, the drawer under hers shot open, then the next, and the next. Every drawer along the wall, one after another, slid open with that same metal-on-metal shriek, until all 9 were pulled wide, each one containing a body arranged exactly as I'd left it hours or days before, except none of them were still. Mrs. Harrow's hand flexed, brittle bones cracking. Her head lolled unnaturally, her jaw tearing fully open now, a sound like wet cloth ripping. Her neighbor, Harold Miller, the heart attack from Williamsport, twisted his torso, arms jerking up like a marionette pulled by clumsy strings. They all moved, sudden puppet-like twitches, limbs stiffly rising, toes flexing, heads turning in sharp, bone-splintering angles. And worst of all were their voices, broken, wet, desperate. "We want to live," a woman gurgled from the second drawer. "Warmth," croaked the drowned man from Lake Mokoma. "Give it back," hissed a child's voice. 5-year-old Lisa Crowley, who had died in a house fire 2 weeks prior. I staggered back, nearly slipping on a puddle of embalming fluid. "This isn't real," I whispered, my voice cracking. "This isn't happening." But the room knew I was lying, because death had stopped behaving. The dead pulled themselves forward, sliding off their trays in jerking movements. Their movements were wrong, each shift accompanied by the wet pop of ligaments breaking, by the dull thud of stiff limbs hitting the floor. They dragged themselves toward me, leaving streaks of fluid and something thicker and darker on the tiles. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but the door to the hall slammed shut with a thunderous crack, metal bending inward as if something had hit it from the outside. The temperature dropped so sharply that frost began to creep along the edges of the windows. I pressed my back against the far wall as the bodies gathered in a semicircle, mouths opening wider than should be possible, breath hissing out in a cold vapor that smelled of earth and something sour. Mrs. Harrow reached me first. Her hand, cold enough to burn, brushed my cheek. Her skin felt like frozen paper, but her grip was strong, unnervingly so. "Let us in," she rasped. "Just a little warmth." I shook my head violently, trying to wrench free. "No, you're dead. You're dead. You're..." Her fingers tightened on my face. "We remember living," she crooned, her voice a chilling combination of sadness and hunger. "We remember light. Let us share yours." Behind her, the others echoed, "Warmth, warmth, warmth." Their voices layered into a suffocating chorus. Hands, so many hands, gripped my arms, my coat, my shoulders, cold needles of touch sinking through the fabric. I screamed, I thrashed, I clawed at them, felt skin slough under my nails, heard limbs crack under my kicks. But they didn't stop. They didn't feel pain. They only crawled closer, pulling, climbing, smothering me with their cold weight. Someone's jaw clamped onto my sleeve. Another's forehead pressed against my chest. A third curled its stiff fingers around my throat. The room spun. The lights flickered violently, buzzing like dying insects. My vision tunneled. Their breath poured over me in waves, colder than any winter I'd ever known. I thought I was going to die. And then, everything stopped. The lights blinked once, twice, buzzed steady. The cold receded like a tide, and I was standing alone in the prep room, panting, shaking, drenched in sweat. Every drawer was closed, tight, perfectly aligned. Every body was still. The room was exactly as I had left it earlier that evening, except for one thing. On the wall opposite me, written in long, wet streaks, as though dragged by fingers long dead, were the words, "We remember living." My breath came in shallow, burning gasps. I wanted to believe I was hallucinating, overtired, overworked, losing my mind. God, I wanted that. But my sleeves still bore teeth marks. I locked the prep room and fled the building, barely pausing to grab my keys. The sleet outside had turned to snow, thick flakes swirling under the street lamp like ashes. As I crossed the parking lot, I felt the cold again, soft at first, then a blade against my spine. A whisper rose from behind me, drifting on the winter wind. Cold. I didn't look back. I drove home with white knuckles, checking the rearview mirror every 5 seconds, expecting to see them, expecting to hear them. When I finally collapsed onto my couch, I kept the lights on, every one of them, even the bathroom. I didn't sleep. Not that night, not for many nights after, because the dead had touched me, and they hadn't forgotten. It's been 32 years, and I feel them more clearly now than ever. The cold finds me no matter where I go. In summer, in sunlight, in crowds, in dreams. Their voices come in whispers through heating vents, through cracked windows, through the floorboards under my bed at night. We remember living. Share your warmth. Sometimes I wake to find frost blooming across the inside of my windows, no matter the season. Sometimes I see fingerprints, long, smudged, dragging downward, appearing on the bathroom mirror while I shower. Sometimes I feel a hand, cold as ice, close around my ankle before I fall asleep. And now Thanksgiving is near again, the anniversary. The dead remember anniversaries. The cold in my house deepens with each passing day. The light bulbs flicker, the rooms exhale, and at night, I hear drawers sliding open in the darkness of my hallway. They are coming closer. They are patient. They want warmth. They want life. And this time, I don't think they'll settle for whispering. This time, I fear they've decided to take what they were denied, what I still have, what they will soon have, because the cold is in my bones now, in my breath, in my blood, and I am so very, very tired. I wonder if they can smell that. I wonder if ghosts can taste exhaustion. I wonder if... Hold on. Someone's whispering behind me.
I always hated the drive back from my mother's house after Thanksgiving dinner. Don't get me wrong, the food was incredible, and the warmth of her tiny dining room always felt like stepping back into some sheltered corner of childhood. But the drive home, that was a different story. To get to my house on the north side of town, I had to pass Carter's Grove Cemetery. Even in daylight, it looked wrong. Too old, too forgotten, too occupied, in a way no graveyard should be. Once the sun set, it became a black shadow along the road, a smear of darker darkness, the crooked silhouettes of headstones leaning like rotten teeth. But this year, as my tires left the comforting glow of the neighborhood and rolled into the country stretch, the November dusk had already hardened into a full, frigid night. Thanksgiving leftovers sat in a plastic container on the seat next to me, still warm from my mother's oven. She had hugged me extra long when I left, and the smell of her cranberry candles clung to my jacket. She always lingered at the door until my car disappeared around the bend. "Drive safe," she said, "and don't dawdle near the cemetery." She said it every time, a half-joking warning, though the way her voice dropped made it sound less like a joke and more like a plea. The sky hung heavy with clouds, the moon smothered somewhere behind them. My headlights carved two pale spears through the darkness as the road narrowed, funneled by trees on both sides. The cold bit through the doors, frosting the edges of the windshield. I gripped the wheel tighter as the cemetery fence came into view. The rusted iron bars rose out of the weeds like the ribcage of a corpse, the entrance gate still hanging crooked from the year that storm knocked part of it loose. No one ever bothered repairing it. People in this town avoided Carter's Grove, even in daylight, even just driving past it. I slowed without meaning to. My breath fogged the air inside the car. The heater was on full blast, had been since I left my mother's driveway. Yet I suddenly felt like someone had opened the door. The cemetery stretched along the left side of the road, rows and rows of crumbling headstones swallowed by shadows. Tall, skeletal trees twisted above them, their branches clawing at the wind. A dead wreath still clung to the fence from some long-ago funeral, the ribbon bleached and frayed. That was when I saw him. At first I thought it was just another gravestone, or maybe a statue of an angel. Those old Victorian cemeteries were full of them. But then the figure moved. He stepped out from behind a tilted marble headstone, emerging into the thin beam of my headlights. A man, or the outline of one. Pale, too pale, almost luminous in the dark. My foot hovered over the gas. Something in me whispered to accelerate. Keep going, keep your eyes forward, do not stop. But I didn't listen. Maybe it was shock, maybe denial, maybe something deeper, some irresistible pull toward the unbelievable. The figure walked slowly, dragging one foot after the other, as though the act of moving cost him effort. His clothing hung in tatters. What little remained clung to him like wet, rotting fabric. His head was bowed, chin nearly touching his chest, and thin strands of hair drifted around his skull like cobwebs. I swallowed hard. My breath felt trapped in my throat. Yes, I whispered to myself. Okay, it's just someone visiting a grave, a homeless guy, a kid messing around, someone real. But my chest tightened because something about him didn't look real. His body wasn't illuminated normally by my headlights. The light seemed to pass through parts of him. His arms shimmered as if he were made of smoke or fog that refused to disperse. I was still staring when his head snapped up. His face, God, that face, sunken eyes like pits, a jaw slack and hanging slightly open, skin stretched too thin, too tight, as if molded over bone. His mouth twitched at the corners, not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. And his eyes, black, bottomless, hungry, locked onto mine across the road. I jerked forward reflexively. My foot slammed down on the accelerator. The engine screamed, then it died. The lights on the dashboard blinked once, twice, then went black. The radio cut out mid-song. The heater sputtered into silence. My car coasted another few feet, but quickly lost momentum, shuddering like something had gripped the tires. The steering wheel stiffened. The world outside the windows swallowed every trace of light. I sat alone in the silence, my heart thundering in my ears. No, I hissed. No, 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 come on, come on. I twisted the key in the ignition. Click, click. Nothing. The headlights flickered weakly, enough to flash white across the cemetery fence. Enough for me to see that the figure was no longer standing where he had been. He was closer, much closer, maybe 20 feet from the road now, his body angled toward me like a predator tracking prey. His movements were no longer slow. He was gliding, feet dragging but covering distance impossibly fast. His neck bent unnaturally, like the bones inside were too soft to support the weight of his skull. My fingers fumbled over the door lock. I wasn't sure if locking it mattered. Could ghosts open doors? Could they even be stopped by something as flimsy as a lock? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. I tried the ignition again. The engine didn't even attempt to turn over. A coldness seeped through the floorboards, rising like a fog through my feet, up my legs, crawling into my chest. My breath came out in ragged plumes. The windows frosted at the edges, spiderwebbing inward. Outside, the figure reached the edge of the road. He stopped. The glow from my dying headlights illuminated him just enough. His eyes glinted wetly, reflecting nothing but emptiness. His hands, if you could call them that, hung loosely at his sides, fingers unnaturally long, bent at strange angles. He stared directly at me, and then he stepped off the curb. I slammed my hand into the horn. It didn't make a sound. The figure approached the driver's side door, each movement jerky, unhuman, like a marionette tugged on tangled strings. His feet scraped along the asphalt. His shoulders twitched with each gliding step. I pressed my back into the seat, eyes wide, breath coming in short, icy bursts. "Go away," I whispered. "Please, please just go away." He stopped inches from my window. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. I didn't even hear leaves rustling or wind blowing. The world held its breath. Then his hand rose. Slowly, deliberately. One elongated finger touched the glass. Tap. The sound was small, delicate, but it echoed inside my skull like a gunshot. He leaned forward, his face pressed to the window, the skin flattening grotesquely against the glass. His eyes rolled upward until the whites glowed sickly in the beam of my failing headlights. His mouth opened wider, wider, the jaw unhinging in crackling increments. I screamed. I don't remember deciding to open the glove compartment. I just found myself doing it, my hand shaking as I fumbled for the flashlight I kept there. My fingers closed around the metal cylinder. I thumbed it on. A weak beam spilled across the ghost's face. He recoiled instantly, jerking backward with a sound like wet fabric tearing. His form flickered, visible 1 second, transparent the next, distorting like smoke blown by a sudden gust. Without thinking, I shoved the car door open. The cold slammed into me like a wall, searing my lungs. But I didn't care. I ran. The flashlight beam wavered wildly as I sprinted down the road, the gravel crunching under my boots. My breath rasped ragged in my throat, every inhale stinging like knives. Behind me, I heard it. The dragging, the scraping, the soft, horrible shuddering sound of something not meant to follow running feet. I didn't dare look back. The road stretched endlessly ahead, swallowed by darkness. No houses, no streetlights, just trees and the rusted fence of the cemetery still running parallel to me. Something cold brushed the back of my neck. I screamed again and stumbled forward, nearly falling to my knees. The flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering against the pavement. It rolled once, twice, then flickered out. The darkness became absolute. I spun around. My chest heaved. "Stay back!" I shouted, though my voice cracked. "Stay!" A hand closed around my ankle. The touch wasn't warm or cold. It was absence. A hollow void that sucked the heat, the breath, the strength right out of me. I toppled backwards. The world tilted, the sky swinging overhead like a pendulum. My back hit the pavement so hard my vision burst into white dots. I gasped, twisting, kicking, trying to free my leg. The grip tightened. The darkness around me shifted, then rose like a wave, like a figure materializing out of black fog. He loomed over me. The ghost's jaw hung open in that silent scream, the edges of his form fraying like shredded cloth. His arms stretched impossibly long, reaching toward me as his mouth widened, wider, splitting the skin at the corners. I dug my nails into the asphalt, dragging myself forward inch by inch. The ghost surged closer. His breath, if it could be called breath, washed over me, colder than ice, smelling of earth and something metallic and old. "Please," I choked out. I didn't do anything. Leave me alone." The ghost's head twitched sharply at my voice. His fingers uncurled from around my ankle. His mouth closed abruptly, the jaw snapping back into place. His eyes, those bottomless, lightless eyes, locked onto mine. I froze. For a long, terrible moment, neither of us moved. Then his expression changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. Not anger, not hunger, recognition. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered, shaking my head desperately. "No, no, no. I don't know you. I don't know you." His form shuddered violently, the edges evaporating and reforming. His hands trembled as he reached toward me, not to grab, but to touch, almost gently, like he was trying to remember something long forgotten. I scrambled backwards, crab-walking away from him. His expression twisted, growing desperate, pleading. And then, a sound echoed across the road. A horn, a car horn. Bright white headlights exploded over the hill, cutting through the darkness like salvation. Tires screeched. The approaching car swerved slightly when the driver saw me sprawled in the road. The ghost's head whipped toward the light. He shrieked, soundless but deafening. His form convulsed, the glow intensifying, flickering wildly. His limbs snapped and curled like he was being pulled apart by invisible hooks. I shielded my face as the ghost erupted into a column of white mist. The wind howled, and he was gone. Just like that. The cold lifted, replaced by the normal November chill. The other car screeched to a stop a few yards away. A man jumped out, shouting something I couldn't make out. My ears were ringing. My body shook uncontrollably. He reached me first. "Jesus Christ, are you okay? What the hell happened? Did you crash?" I tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words wouldn't leave my throat. I just clutched his arm and shook my head. He helped me into his car and drove me home. I don't remember the drive, only the warmth of the heater and the way my shaking slowly subsided into a dull tremble. My own car was towed the next morning. The mechanic said there was nothing wrong with it, not one single thing. Not the battery, not the alternator, nothing. "Cars don't just die like that," he muttered, scratching his head. "Not unless something drains them." Drain. The word made my skin crawl. I never drove past Carter's Grove Cemetery again. I took the long route across town, even if it meant adding an extra 20 minutes. But on quiet nights, when the wind is still and the clouds hang low, I sometimes think about the ghost's face. Not the terror of it, not the hunger, but the moment he looked like he knew me. And the awful truth that sometimes slips through my mind when I'm tired or alone. I think he did. I just don't know how or why. Not yet.
The day after Thanksgiving has always been my day, the unofficial start of the Christmas season, and the one day I can indulge in the extravagant ritual of turning our quiet corner of the Vermont woods into something bright. It was something my father did too. I guess that's why, even now in my 40s, stringing lights feels less like a chore and more like a strange kind of inheritance. My wife took the kids into town that morning. They were excited about some holiday craft fair at the community center. I stayed behind, claiming I needed a quiet house so I can finally get the lights up. What I really wanted was the cold, the pine smell, the solitude of working outside. Maybe you'd understand if you'd grown up the way I did. Winter is when the woods feel most honest. No buzzing of insects, no rustling underbrush, no camouflage for the secrets that hide between the trees. Except that day, something felt off from the moment I stepped outside. The sky hung low and colorless, the kind of pale gray that makes it impossible to tell what time it is. There was no wind, not even the slightest breeze, just stillness. Even the snow that clung to the branches looked frozen in place rather than resting naturally. I remember thinking, it's too quiet, but I shrugged it off, tugged on a thick pair of gloves, and trudged around the back of the house where the first box of lights waited. The woods stretched out behind me, dense pines, maples stripped bare, a scattering of birches. We had neighbors, technically, but they were far enough away that you couldn't see their homes. That's what we wanted when we bought the place. Privacy, wilderness, the sort of calm you can't find in town. As it turns out, privacy isn't always your friend. I started with the roof line, classic warm white string lights, and then moved to the shrubs near the driveway. I just plugged in a section to make sure it worked when I felt it, a prickle across the back of my neck, like being watched. I froze with the plug halfway inserted into the extension cord. It's probably just a deer, I thought, or one of the neighbor's dogs that sometimes wandered too far from home. But something told me not to turn around too quickly, so I did it slowly, deliberately, scanning the tree line. Nothing. Just the stark lines of trees and a carpet of old snow. I exhaled and shook my head. "You're imagining things," I muttered. But I couldn't shake the feeling. For the next half hour I worked quickly, almost frantically. I told myself it was the cold making me jittery, but deep down I knew it wasn't the cold. It was the quiet, the unnatural stillness of the forest. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. Around noon, I decided to take a break and warm my hands. I plugged in the lights I'd finished, stepped back to admire them, then headed toward the side door of the house. That's when I saw the footprints. Not mine, not my wife's, not the kids'. Fresh, very fresh, leading from the woods to the driveway and stopping about 20 feet from me. My breath caught in my throat. The prints were crisp and deep, the sort that keep their shape before melting. Whoever made them had been there no more than minutes ago. I felt the quiet again. Heavy. Too heavy. The prints didn't lead back into the woods. There was only one direction, out of the trees and toward me. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. No answer. I backed toward the house door, my eyes darting from tree to tree. Nothing moved. Not a shadow. Not a branch. Eventually, because I had to, I forced myself back inside and locked the door behind me. The warmth felt wrong after the cold outside, like I'd stepped out of one world and into another. I made myself a cup of coffee I didn't really want, then stared through the kitchen window at the woods for several minutes. No one appeared. By the time my coffee cooled, I'd convinced myself it was some hunter passing through. People wandered these woods all the time. I was overreacting. That's what I told myself anyway. I went back out. Because, of course, I did. I was wrapping lights around the small pine tree near the driveway, the one we called the kid's tree, when I heard crunching footsteps. Not close, but not far either, coming from the direction of the woods. "Hello?" I said again, standing up. This time someone answered. A man stepped out between two maples, tall, gaunt, wearing an old green parka that looked a size too big for him. His boots were unlaced, the tongue sticking out awkwardly. His jeans were soaked up to the knees as if he'd walked through a river. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was his expression, or lack of one. His face was blank, completely neutral, like he'd forgotten what emotion was supposed to look like. His eyes, though, they were the unsettling part. Too pale, almost colorless, and they didn't blink enough. He stopped maybe 10 feet away. "Afternoon," he said, with a stiff nod. His voice was flat, quiet, almost gentle, but not in a comforting way. More like someone imitating what they thought gentleness sounded like. Hey," I replied, forcing a smile. "Didn't see you there." "No," he said simply. "I suppose not." He looked around, taking in the lights, the house, the driveway. His eyes lingered on the pine tree I'd decorated. "Getting ready for Christmas," he said. "Yeah," I replied, chuckling nervously. We do things early around here." He tilted his head, studying me. "I saw the lights from the ridge. They're very bright." "Oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean to disturb." "Not disturbing," he interrupted. "Just bright." We stood in silence for a moment that felt far too long. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Can I help you with something?" He looked past me, toward the house, then toward the woods. His eyes flicked between the two like he was comparing them, evaluating. "No," he said after a beat. "Just looking." Another long pause. Then, "You live here with your family?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," I answered slowly. "My wife and kids." He nodded. "They're not home." "What?" He gestures toward the empty driveway. "No other cars." "Right. They're in town for a bit." Another nod. Another silence. His breath was visible in the cold air, slow and measured. Mine was shaky. "Nice meeting you," I said, inching toward the front steps. "I should get back to..." "Do you ever get scared out here?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. Scared? Being alone, in the woods. He paused. "Things happen in the woods." Something cold crept into my spine. "I guess so," I said. "But we like it quiet here." "Quiet," he repeated. "Yes, it's very quiet." He looked over his shoulder into the tree line, as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge. Then he smiled. Except it wasn't a real smile. It was too sudden, too wide, too practiced, like a picture of a smile rather than an actual one. "Well," he said, "enjoy your decorating." And without another word, he turned and walked back into the woods. Not around the house, not down the road, straight into the dense trees, the way someone familiar with the terrain might. I stayed rooted in place until he disappeared into the shadows. Even then, I listened for footsteps until I couldn't hear any. When I finally exhaled, my breath shook. I knew, without knowing why, that something was very wrong. I forced myself to finish the tree lights, though my hands trembled. I kept turning toward the woods, half expecting to see the man standing there again. He didn't come back. I told myself that was good. By the time I finished, all I wanted was the safety of the house. But as I walked toward the front door, I thought, stupidly, that I should check the woods again, just to be sure. Nothing moved. But the footprints were still there. Only now, there were more, leading deeper into the forest, not away from the house, around it, as if he'd circled the property before approaching me. I swallowed hard and went inside. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I dialed my wife. "Hey," she answered cheerfully over the sound of kids laughing. "We're almost..." "Don't come home yet," I said. She stopped. "What? Why? What's wrong?" "There was a guy, a stranger. He came out of the woods. Something's off about him. I don't... Just stay in town a little longer, okay?" Her tone shifted immediately. "What did he do?" "Nothing. But his vibe was weird, really weird. And he asked about you and the kids. Did you call the police?" I hesitated. "No. I don't even know what I'd say. He didn't threaten me. He didn't do anything illegal. Except creep you out." "Yeah," I whispered. "Except that. Do you want me to come home?" "No." The word came out too quickly. "Stay where it's busy. I'll call you in a bit." We hung up. I locked every door and every window. Then I stood by the kitchen window again, eyes fixed on the woods. I kept waiting to see a figure standing there. I didn't, but I felt like he was watching me anyway. It was nearly 3 p.m. when I heard the knocking, 3 solid raps on the front door. I froze mid-step. Nobody knocks on our door without calling first. Out here, that's just the way it is. Slowly, silently, I approached the entryway. I didn't open it. "Hello?" I called through the door, my voice cracking. "It's me," said the quiet, flat voice. My blood turned to ice. I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then, "You didn't finish the lights." "I'm done for today," I said, trying to sound firmer than I felt. "You missed a section on the roofline." He'd been looking at my roof, from the woods. I checked the peephole slowly. He was standing on the porch, too close to the door. His face was inches from the glass. His eyes didn't blink. He stared at the peephole as if he knew I was looking. My pulse hammered in my ears. "I wanted to see them," he said softly. All lit up. "Come back when my family is home," I blurted out. His head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. "I prefer it quiet." I stepped back from the door instinctively. "You need to leave." He didn't move. "You should go," I repeated louder. Then, finally, he smiled again. That unnatural, puppet-like smile. "I will," he said. And he walked off the porch, but not toward the driveway, not toward the road. Back into the woods. Always back into the woods. I waited until he was gone before I ran to the bedroom and grabbed the old hunting rifle my father left me. I'd never used it for anything more than target shooting, but holding it made me feel less helpless. The sun started setting soon after. The woods darkened, and that's when the real fear set in. My wife texted around 4:30, "We're grabbing dinner in town. You okay?" I wrote back, "Yeah, stay there. I'll explain later." I sat in the living room, rifle across my lap, lights still glowing outside, reflecting off the snow. They looked festive, comforting, completely at odds with the terror sitting in my chest. Every so often I'd hear a sound from the woods, a crack of a branch, a faint crunch of snow, and I'd stiffen. He was out there. I knew he was, watching, waiting. What I didn't know, and never knew, was the truth. He'd killed before, more than once, always in forests, always places like ours, quiet, secluded homes at the edge of wilderness. The newspapers would piece it together later, months after that night, when they finally found the shallow graves. But that night, of course, I had no idea. I only had fear and instinct. Around 6 p.m., something tripped the motion sensor light near the back deck. It flicked on, flooding the snow with a harsh white glow. I stood, hands shaking, rifle raised. I waited. Nothing moved. but the feeling of being watched surged, hard enough to make my breath hitch. Another crack of a branch. Closer. Too close. I took one step toward the sliding glass door, then another. The backyard was empty, yet the woods stared back at me like a mouth full of teeth. At 6:18 p.m., I remembered the exact time because I kept looking at the clock. A soft tapping sounded on the kitchen window. Not a knock, a tap, light, intentional. I turned slowly. He was there, standing just outside, his face inches from the glass again, watching me with those pale, unblinking eyes. I froze. He lifted one hand and placed it flat against the window. Then he mouthed something. 3 words. I couldn't hear them. I didn't want to. I backed away, rifle shaking in my hands. He didn't move. He just stood there, breathing fog onto the cold glass, smiling that awful smile. Then he turned and walked into the darkness. The police found nothing when they searched later that night. No footprints, no signs of anyone, as if he'd never been there. But I know he was. I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind dies and the woods go still, I swear I can feel him again, watching, waiting, and smiling, just like before.